All right, lesson 5. This one's called Making Your First Audio Recording. And the goals for this lesson are to set up your Pro Tools hardware and software for recording audio. Specifically, do you have enough space and what to do there. Secondly, create and configure a click track. Third, record audio onto tracks in your session or project. 4, recognize whole file clips and subset clips. And finally, organize your clips and audio files after the recording to minimize clutter and optimize your session. So the first thing to consider when you start a project is, do you have enough resources? So one of those resources would be hard drive space. So is your hard drive big enough to support the session that you're doing? And of course, Pro Tools, like most other DAWs, can record at a variety of sample rates and bit depth, and those decisions affect file size. And I'm going to put a box on the screen here to show you how to calculate file size. Basically, you take the sample rate times your bit depth, and you can get bits per second. And if we take that times 60, we can get bits per minute. And of course, you know from other classes that computers store these bits on hard drives, and bits make up bytes, and bytes make up kilobytes, and kilobytes make up megabytes. So we can take that into our calculation and finally get to the point where we can take our sample rate times our bit depth divided by the bits per minute, or megabytes per minute, and we can get a calculation there. The other easy way to do it is just to go to your window menu and go to disk usage. And we can see here on my older laptop that I have one hard drive available, and its size is 233 gigabytes, and I have 7 gigabytes available. Basically 3% of my drive is available, which is not good for recording, but that's where we are right now. I could switch over to Studio One in a second. In fact, let's do that right now. I want to switch over to Studio One, and let's look at disk usage here. And we can see that the user drive is nearly 2 terabytes, and we have 1.2 terabytes available. So 45% or 43% of the drive is available, and we are good to go doing a 48K 24-bit per minute mono track. We could go for a long time, 151,000 minutes. So that's pretty good. Let's go back to my laptop. Okay, so just know what your resources are when you start to do this. So the other thing we can do is, if you're doing a track for popular music, or something that has a beat that you want to keep to the a click, we can create a click track. And one way to do that is to just make an auxiliary track and then put some sort of click plug-in on it, or create an instrument track that had a MIDI instrument that you could set up for that, maybe a drum machine. But the other easy way is just to go to the track menu and say create click track. And Pro Tools will create an auxiliary track and put a click plug-in on that track. So if we click on the click plug-in, we bring up this window, our plug-in window, that shows us the controls for that click plug-in. We can the way this plugin functions is that it has 2 clicks, 1 and 2, and the first click is for if you want to accent the primary beat of the bar, so beat 1 of each bar. It doesn't have to be accented. You could choose an unaccented sound, let's say cowbell 1, and we could put cowbell 2 on the other ones if you want it to be unaccented, or we could have an accented. Where's my... So you can do that. You can also change the volume. So you can make that accented sound very unaccented if you turn the volume down. The beats per minute is governed by our tempo map at this moment. If we look at our transport here, we can see that we are following the conductor track, which is the tempo map. So whatever this is set to, I'll change that. That affects our beats per minute there. And we are doing a click because we have the sounds turned on here by the metronome. If we turn that off, we won't hear it. We can also, that's an option there. We can turn the click on and off, so that'll affect that button. If you double click on that, it'll bring up the options for the click and count off controls. So these would be, do you want this to happen? Do you want the click to happen during play and record? That's the default. That's nice because, you know, obviously you need it while you're recording. Sometimes I do turn it down in the control room and just listen to the drummer, but hopefully the drummer is listening to the click. You can have it only during record and only during count off if you just want to get them started at the right tempo and then let them run with it. The controls in the middle, the note, velocity, duration, and output, are only if you're going out to an external MIDI device for your sounds. So those don't happen here if you don't need it. And then finally, the count off controls. Typically, it's only during record that you want the count off to happen. If you turn this off, then you would have count off happening every time you play back, which would be annoying, although you could turn it off there too. And then how many bars of a count off do you need? 2 is the standard, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, go. But if they want more or less, then you can change how many bars that happens. And of course, all of this happens, the count off in particular happens if we engage it or not engage it here in the transport window. I wonder if there's a count off control. I guess I don't see it. Maybe this is the only way to turn it on and off. And if I have it on, and I have an audio track here with a valid input, just choose that. Yes, good. If I go ahead and record and play, see, notice it's not recording. Now after 2 bars it starts recording. So that's the count off feature. And if I was just playing back, it's not going to count off even though it's still engaged because we had that option only during record. So that's a quick, and there are other manufacturers that make click plugins. Some are better than others. We used to have a few at the studio. I have to check to see if we still have those, but definitely this is the one that's built into Pro Tools, so that one is always available. Okay, let's go to check our hardware connections, and I'm going to switch over to Studio One here because it has more hardware. Okay, when we talk about checking hardware connections in this section of the lesson, Avid is just asking you to make sure that you have your hardware attached, that you know how it works. There might be switches on it for, you know, engaging phantom and turning up your preamps or adjusting your preamp level. How that gets into Pro Tools, you can go to the setup and hardware setup. So if your interface, a lot of the core audio interfaces, it'll just say check your core audio, which would mean that you would need to go then to either the specific manufacturer's plugins for that or applications for that if it's a Motu device, or maybe it's a core audio device where you just use the sound control panel or the audio MIDI setup to do some of those settings. But in Studio One, I came in here because there's a lot of HDIO interfaces, and each one of those HDIO interfaces has adjustments for the inputs and outputs. So we just have to make sure that we have our hardware connected and the stuff that we need to have on is on. And when we connect I'm going to set up, actually I just set up a signal generator to pretend that it's a microphone. I routed that signal to a microphone preamp. That microphone preamp output is now going into one of the inputs on our Avid interfaces, which we will see in Pro Tools. So that's what we mean by checking your hardware setup. Once we do that, once you figure out that you have stuff available, we need to add a track, so I'm going to say Command Shift N and add a mono track. I just have one microphone set up, so I'm going to add a track. You'll find out that there's shortcuts for everything in the future, meaning like I could double click and add a track. There's lots of ways of doing things in Pro Tools, and you'll find out those ways as we go along. I'm going to make this track a little bigger. Okay, so I need to make sure that I have a way into that track. So I'm going to select my input path, and I do that by going to the input selector, either in my edit window if I'm looking at I/O, which I am, or I can go over to my mix window. This might be the more natural place to do it. And I'm looking at the input selection right here. And I know that I have these drums set up, and I have a microphone on my drums, which is basically just my signal generator. And I patched that into the John Hardy preamp, and I can show you video of that John Hardy preamp, which is right here. So if my voice trailed off a little bit, I should probably switch to my other microphone, but I just showed you the John Hardy preamp. You can see the signal was going into the John Hardy. I need to select the path that the John Hardy is connected to, and then I can record enable that track, and I should see audio right away once I record enable. So when I record enable, that is just telling that track, look at your input and let's monitor the level of that input. So it doesn't matter, this is a big misnomer, it doesn't matter what this fader is set at. That fader could be all the way down, and I still have the same level. The only way to adjust this input level is to do it at the microphone preamp. So I'm going to go turn my microphone preamp up a little bit, we should see this level go up. So my level has now gone up, and I'm hitting a pretty good level. If I knew the drummer was going to stay there, I might bring it up a little bit more, but you never know what drummers are going to do. So I like to at least get my peaks up into the yellow range there. You could have them peaking at least -6 if you want, but you can be conservative. We're doing 24-bit recording. So we do that. We adjust our input path. We record enable. We'll learn in the future there's also input monitoring. But if you're going to be recording, you might as well just record enable the track, which means that this track is ready to record audio. And of course, if I had other tracks, I'm going to bring up some more tracks here. We would want all of these tracks to have different inputs. So if I had, in this case, 6 microphones set up, maybe this first one was kick, and then I could say maybe snare top, snare bottom, and then maybe tom 1, and what do we have left here? I'm going to say overhead left and overhead right. So I'm going to name my tracks right away. We already talked about doing that, and I want to record enable those tracks as well. Once I have my inputs selected, I want to select inputs for these. I don't have microphones set up, so I'm just going to choose. There's a fast way to do this too that we'll show you later in the course, but actually I'll just show you right now. If I hold down, if I select all these tracks, and if I knew that these inputs were true system 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I can do several things. If I hold down the option key and I select, that's going to change the input of all of these to the same one. So let's change them all to Grace 4. So now they're all on Grace 4 because I held down the option key while I did that selection. If I hold down the option shift key, it's only going to change what these of the selected channels. So I could say all of these are Grace 7. So now all of the selected ones are Grace 7, and the other one that wasn't selected didn't change. Now the third modifier key to hold down is the command key. If I do this, then it will do a incremental change. So I could say true system 1, and it'll just go down the list and assign the inputs. And it'll do this for lots of things, but right now we're just talking about inputs. So I'm going to say the first one is true system 1, and then I want it to go down the list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to put this one back on John Hardy 2 because that's where it needs to be. So we want the basic thing is you want unique inputs for each one of your microphones so that it records that microphone to its own track. And then we want to record enable these. And again, we could just hold down the option key and it'll record enable all of them at the same time, or hold on the option key and turn them all off at the same time. So there's a few shortcuts to use. The Pro Tools book says for best results, aim for an average peak input around -6 dB full scale. And their point is these are full scale. This is a digital meter, a digital peak meter. So if we happen to have it on that. So this is a digital peak meter. So it's saying aim for this -6 area. And so right now it's saying my level is pretty low. And I could certainly raise that up or keep it the same there. You might want to pan your microphones right off the bat. And just like the faders, we're not listening to this right now. If I had mine. This fader is only the monitor level. It's not the input level. So I can pan that left and right. You're not going to hear that on the recording because I'm not putting this audio into the video. We're just hearing it through my microphone. But you can go ahead and pan these. These are all for playback monitoring. It does not affect the input signal. Okay, I think I might pan these the way I would normally do them in a session. So kick maybe straight up, snare a little to the right because I do audience perspective. Tom, high tom, usually a little to the right, middle tom, low tom. And then overheads, we might as well go left and right. Okay, so when we record, we can use the transport window. I have that up here by saying window transport. Let's look at our edit window. We also have transport controls in the edit window. I can press the record button. That'll get the system ready to record. It'll be flashing because it's ready. And as soon as I want to start recording, I either hit with the mouse the play button in either one of the locations, or I can hit the space bar, and we will be recording. We'll let that go for a few seconds. And then press the space bar again to stop, or use the mouse on the stop button. So there's our first recording in Pro Tools. So what you'll notice here is that Pro Tools has a naming convention, and that helps us organize our sessions. So you notice that the name of the track corresponds to the name of the clip, or the name of the clip corresponds to the name of the track. And since this was our first take, it says _01. And that's kind of Pro Tools' nomenclature. It does _01 is kind of the take number. When you first edit the file, it'll do dash and then a number of the edit. And you'll notice in our clip list that we have bold. Well, it's hard to notice that right now, but because these are all the same typeface, but these are all bold in type. And that means that these are whole file, W-H-O-L-E. These are whole file clips. Once I do any editing, let's maybe trim out the kick here. You notice that that creates a new subset clip. And so that's not in bold. And you see that -01. I mean, these are just, this is how arbitrary, it's not arbitrary, but this is how Pro Tools names the files, but you can rename files. Okay, so on the whole file clips, if I double click on it, you notice before, I went a little fast there, but there was name of clip only and name of clip and disk file. So when I'm on a subset clip, I can rename it, but I don't, it just renames it here because we're not renaming the parent file in a subset clip. But when we're on a whole file, we can rename both the clip and the parent file that's on your hard drive. So what I mean there is that if I rename this snare top, I don't know, maple. It was a maple snare for that take. I've changed the clip title here and also on my hard drive. If I look at that audio file, now I have that changed the file name as well. I love that option of renaming parent files in this way because I know that it's actually changed the file so that when I look at this session in years to come, that the name of the clip in the Pro Tools session matches what's on the hard drive. So I prefer that option. But the point is here we have whole files that are in bold and subset clips that are not in bold. And the subset clips are just versions of the parent file that have now been edited and are still in our clip list. And we can bring those down. It's an actual reference to that parent file, but that's just a subset clip. So we talked about renaming. Let's talk about removing it. Of course, we're talking, we can remove it from the playlist, but Pro Tools has a way of removing it from the session. So if I go up here to the triangle menu, well, first I have to select something. So if I select my kick, and maybe I select both of them here, I can do command clicks on things, or any way of selecting. You can select them here, and then I'll select them. So any way of selecting them, then I go up here to my clear command, and I have some options. One option is just to remove the selected clips from the session. And if I do that, it just removes it from the session, but it does not remove it from the hard drive. So I'm looking at snare top maple and snare bottom. So I'm going to say remove. And it's going to give me a warning that says, hey, listen, you're using these in the file or in the session. Do you really want to remove them? So I'm going to say, and if you don't want to hit yes all the time, you can just say option, and I'll do all those for you. If you had like 50 of these selected, and you could just say option click. So now they're not in my session. Let's look at the hard drive. Snare, maple, and snare bottom are still on my hard drive. So I could bring those back into my session. And now they're back in my session. The other option, I want to select snare top maple here. Clear. These two options on a Macintosh are the same. I'm not sure about Windows. But move to trash for the selected source files if possible. I'm not sure when it's not possible. For most parts, I think it just deletes it. But if you press the delete button, it will delete the file permanently. It skips that trash can or maybe recycle bin, whatever Windows puts on it, and it just go ahead and deletes it. Now, since it's deleting the file from the system, this is not undoable. This is a permanent, irreversible command. So you want to make sure that you actually want this to happen. I'm going to say delete. It's going to ask me if I really want to be deleted and gone forever. I want to say yes. So it removed it from our session. It removed it from the hard drive. It is not, let's look at, make sure I'm in the right trash can. It is not in the trash. So it is gone forever. So you might want to make sure that you really want to do that. And I think that's good for this lesson. Let's go on to something else.